Hi, good evening, and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Kay from Greenlight, and we're thrilled to host tonight's event with Lane Milburn launching his graphic novel, Lure. He'll be talking with Tom Kaczynski, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I want to say a huge thank you to Lane, Tom, and the team at Fantagraphics for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Although we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple of different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Lure, is available for sale at Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at both our Fulton Street and Flatbush Ave stores, where you can purchase Lane's book and many others on site. You can also order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll drop the buy link in the chat. You can also get a signed book plate by request while supplies last. Make sure to indicate your signed book plate request in order comments at checkout when ordering online, or look for signed copies when you visit the store. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Our interviewer tonight is cartoonist and publisher Tom Kaczynski. He is the author of the award-winning cartoon dialectic series, many essays on the comics medium, and the forthcoming Trans-Terra graphic novel. Tom is also the founder of Uncivilized Books, a boutique publishing house and think tank specializing in comic books, esoterica, and rogue theories. A new edition of beta testing, The Ongoing Apocalypse, his award-nominated graphic novel, will be coming out this winter from Fantagraphics. Tom will be speaking with our featured author, Lane Milburn. Lane Milburn is a cartoonist based in Chicago, Illinois. His campy, trippy sci-fi adventure, 12 Gems, was published by Fantagraphics in 2014. He has self-published many other works, including one funded by a Xeric grant, and has contributed weekly comics to Vice.com. In his new book, Lure, a group of idealistic young artists from Earth are commissioned to collaborate on a corporate art project for a planet that has been colonized for luxury living. Showcasing Milburn's rich visual imagination, with the planet Lure serving as an ever-seductive, otherworldly paradise against which he spotlights themes of climate change, the disparity of wealth, and the value of art, all in the service of a grippingly moral thriller. Lane is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then he'll be talking with Tom and with all of you. Please take it away, Lane and Tom.
I thank you all so much. I'm Lane. This is my book, Lure. Please order it from Greenlight Bookstore. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much, everybody, for attending tonight. I am going to do a little reading from the book here. Let me pull that up. So my book, Lure, It has been is a project that's been 5 years in the making. Actually, one year longer. I'll get into that a little bit. It posits an alternate reality where the Earth, or an Earth-like stand-in, is orbited by a second ocean world called Lure that, as Kay mentioned, is being colonized for luxury living by billionaires and other elites. My main character is a young woman named Jo Spartz, who is sent to the planet to create a piece of art for an economic summit that is being held on the planet. This project began its life way back in early 2015 as a comic strip called Envoy, serialized on Vice.com. This is an image from the original comic strip. I actually worked on this comic strip for a full year, and by the end of that year, I had about 50 completed hand-colored pages. But when I read over the book, I was just not happy with the writing, and so I scrapped it and began anew. And the project I began anew in early 2016 is the book that I will be talking about today. Just a quick note about influences. It's pretty clear to many people who are comics fans that that I'm heavily influenced by Moebius, the French cartoonist who is best known for his 1970s era work in heavy metal. And as the panel I just showed you was hand colored, but the finished Lure book is digitally colored with flat color tones and some gradients, and that is very much a treatment of color that I've borrowed from Moebius. A literary influence on this book was Ursula K. Le Guin's 1974 novel, The Dispossessed, which somewhat similarly to my book posits a kind of like twin planetary system that it explores economic societies that result from different economic ideologies. So there's kind of like a capitalist planet and an anarcho syndicalist or socialist planet, and it kind of explores the different societies that emerge from these different ideologies. My book is not so much like that, but I was very much thinking about economic systems and definitely the twin world kind of framework. These are a few sneak peek images from the book, showcasing the planet Lure here in this panel, in kind of a luxury dining scenario. This is sort of from a dream sequence, and then this is an image from back on our Earth, you know, but a very like speculative kind of alternate reality version of Earth, with a lot of fantastical kind of technologies and imagery going on. And so in this kind of science fictional framework, I've also tried to tell a familiar story of people with careers and relationships kind of trying to find their way in these systems and in these worlds. And so I'll be reading a sequence from early in the book where my main character, Jo Spartz, and a couple of her friends are eating in a restaurant after Jo has just gotten the news that she will be sent to Lure, the other planet, by her employer. And this kind of gets you in the feeling for the world here a bit. I'll have the black bean burger with tater tots. Rock on, homie. And for you? I'll have the same, please. Hey, guy, I think she's into you. And for you? I'll have the same, actually. Fuck yeah, party people. I'll have this out in a snap. She's a riot. She's annoying. Aw. I was looking at an article earlier about all this crazy new stuff they're building on Lure. There's going to be a gigantic full-size golf course that just floats out on the water. I think I've heard about that thing. Place just gets douchier and douchier all the time. Don't know how I'll make it out of there alive. The guy who wrote the article said they put him under, and then when he woke up, he was there. Yeah, they make it sound so easy. It's funny, people talk about going to sleep and then waking up out there and then going to sleep again and waking up back here. Maybe they're not actually going anywhere at all. Oh, you know who else went to Lure? Alex Binder last summer. He seemed into it. Yeah, he would be. I went to the worst show ever at his place senior year. Becca, you've heard this. Remember that horrible jazz band Alex was in? The World's Smartest Baby, I think they were called. Oh, I never got to see them play. Consider yourself lucky. It was just this tepid, lazy, free jazz shit. So they play for a few minutes and then Alex takes out his credit card and starts like raking it up and down across the valves of his saxophone to no interesting effect. And then Alex runs out into the audience and the drummer puts a drum over his head and he walks all zombie-like out into the audience. People are cheering. It was the worst. That actually kind of sounds all right. No. All right, you maniacs, try not to rip yourselves apart now. Thank you. Thanks. Enjoy. Well, soon maybe they'll open a Captain Petey's on Lure and then both of you can come join me. I know there are like restaurants opening up there. Shit, now I feel like I ordered too much. Eric, will you eat some of this? Yeah. If they opened a Captain Petey's on Lure, I would totally transfer. And that's that. It's kind of the project originally was like a little more pulpy, and now it's kind of an unusual blend of like realism and the fantastical. So hopefully that draws people in and gets them curious to read more.
Thanks for reading that. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like a really nice introduction to sort of the world below and kind of what it thinks about the world above. So let me start with this kind of more more provocative question. I'm gonna start with J.G. Ballard, which you don't mention as an influence, but he once said that science fiction is kind of the new novel of now. As opposed to sort of the classic bourgeois novel, which kind of talks about everyday life, et cetera, et cetera. The science fiction, our lives are so science fictional that science fiction is really now the classic bourgeois novel. And I would complicate that with one more step, which is like science fiction comics are the novel of now. And I'm curious, kind of how you kind of got to science fiction and comics, and how you think about them in the sort of the contemporary culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have to make a very embarrassing confession, first of all, that is that I've actually never read Ballard, even though I have had my work over the years I've had him mentioned in the context of my work over the years, and I'm sure there's much in him that is essential to my development that I have completely missed out on. But I feel like I have kind of gained some sense of him and of his work by proxy, by his influence upon others and by commentary around him. So it's interesting what he says about science fiction, and this book is billed as science fiction, and I think it is in some respects, and it is not in some others. I don't think it goes very deep into scientific concepts. It kind of posits a reality that is clearly not our reality. I mean, clearly we don't live in a twin planetary system. But like I think what I would imagine what Ballard does and what I do is to kind of like use use science fictional motifs and fantastical motifs to kind of like create like a landscape of contemporary feeling. And I think you do that in your work as well. And I think that like the science fiction and speculative fiction generally are a great way to kind of like to create like a surrogate reality that embodies the kind of like the real landscape of feeling that we inhabit. I think about these kind of genre considerations a lot, and they like sort of thinking about the rules of certain genres, or not even the rules, but thinking about like instances of what has been made before certainly help me generate ideas. I kind of love to nerd out on like unusual mixtures of like the real and the fantastical. Something I think though that may speak to the question is that like I read a lot of fiction and not just comics and like and not just genre stuff either. And I've heard other authors mention this, that like even the most realist, even like a contemporary realist novel will give you a curated version of reality. You know what I mean? There's no way that a book can encompass all or like anything more than like a small postage stamp size of like the real world that we inhabit. And so in that sense, I feel like science fiction and fantastical fiction generally is it feels natural to me, because it's kind of about creating like a landscape of feeling, a psychic space, and an arena for different ideas and themes to play out.
Yeah, no, I definitely got that from your work. When I think of my work, I think of it as sort of like science fiction 5 minutes in the future. It's like, it's very familiar, but also it kind of pushes things just a little bit. What I was thinking in terms of your in terms of the sort of the planet Lure as this other place, and you compared it to kind of the twin worlds of Ursula Le Guin's books. Mm-hmm. I definitely think of our society now, at least like the sort of the first world, America, Europe society has kind of another planet, and that's kind of the internet. It's kind of this world that you can travel to. A lot of people just kind of essentially have self-exiled themselves in that world from this planet.
Right.
I'm curious if you if you were trying to draw on some very specific contemporary themes that that sort of get transformed into this planet that you created.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's like there is a little bit of like the internet as a motif in the book. Later on, when they get to the planet Lure, there's like a little bit of discussion of internet use. And I think that like for me, the planet Lure is kind of like an all encompassing, for me in this book, it's kind of a symbol of alienation that encompasses a few different themes and issues. Like I'm really some terrain that you explore in your work is kind of like how capitalism and modernity create comforts. They fulfill our in some ways they have created like a society that fulfills our needs in a way that has never been before, but it also creates atomization and alienation. So I wanted some of that to be in the planet Lure, and then I also and then definitely some of the kind of like so when the characters get to Lure, there's actually, it's not like a vast kind of world that they can explore. It's entirely covered by ocean, and there's essentially like one building on the planet that people can go to. It's this like floating like hotel orb structure, and that's kind of where, you know, all of the all the elites hang out and so on. And so there is kind of a loneliness about it, and there was like a loneliness to contemporary modernity that I wanted to evoke with that, and then the internet factors into that, and then I was also thinking about economic inequality, like there are very few people on Lure. In my book, my main character Jo is sent to the planet to create a piece of art with her coworkers for something called the Lure Economic Summit, and I had consciously based that off of the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, which is kind of a hub of like all of the world's political, financial, corporate leaders who kind of meet every year to hang out and have like inspiring lectures, whatever, you know, so-called, and basically plot all of our collective fates. So that's what I was thinking about. It's kind of, I also wanted to create like something that looks on the surface like the planet Lure is kind of alien, but it's also like it has this kind of like summery like beach vacation luxury feeling about it. So I wanted to give it kind of like an innocent or attractive face, because that's kind of how I feel like power, you know, in our world is it's not some big glaring thing. It's not like a big ugly neon corporate logo or something. It's a little the ways it's manifest can be hard to depict sometimes.
Yeah, they're kind of more diffuse and kind of you know, works through almost like through obfuscation rather than through like overt you know, sort of power moves or whatever.
Right.
The planet, you know, so the planet itself is interesting to me. I don't know if you ever read Lem or saw maybe the movie Solaris.
Yeah, I read that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's, you know, that kind of positive, that's like an ocean planet, but the ocean is, you know, kind of a living organism, and it has like these psychic effects on the people that visit it. And it seems like Lure had some kind of you know, it seemed to have some kind of subtle psychic effect on some of the characters. Am I reading that correctly, or am I kind of reading too far into it?
I don't think you are. I think that was something I was absolutely thinking of Solaris when I was working on this. Solaris is kind of like, I think it might be my favorite sci-fi novel, and I think that like I think that, yeah, this project had a pretty long gestation period, and I was thinking actively of Solaris while working on it, and I definitely like had some ideas for kind of weird elements that would occur, like weird interactions between the characters and the sort of like psyche of the planet, and like there's nothing like really concrete about that in the book, but like there are some moments I think that kind of verge on that, and that are a little undefined, and like there's also kind of a spiritual element to the book that I was not really like. There's kind of this fable-like story introduced at the beginning of this deity who created the second world from out of the earth, you know, in the like pre-Cambrian era or something, before that really, but that was like not something that I was planning to have in the book from the outset, but I think it just kind of welled up unconsciously, and I feel like some of the kind of weirdness emanating from the planet itself and the ideas of you know what it might be, or you know, a sense of mystery or something kind of I guess became manifest in that like spiritual aspect to the story. But yeah, yeah, there are some kind of like undefined, surprising things in the book as well. And yeah, I don't have like spiritual beliefs, but I kind of had lots of images and moods that would kind of well up, and that I unconsciously, and that I just wanted to kind of bring into the book. And I left it kind of vague because I don't have any like particular point, I guess, to make about any of those things or conclusions. I feel like the book tries to be kind of light on conclusions, which was something I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely, I felt there was kind of a spiritual dimension, but it was undefined, and it seemed to be kind of seeping into the psyches of the characters, and maybe the project that they were creating for this space Davos was maybe kind of influenced by this weird spiritual thing. It made me think a little bit of some Greek mythology, or just even like kind of the Gaia hypothesis, like the idea of the planet being kind of a conscious being.
Right.
But and I'm wondering whether that's maybe that kind of that unstated, unformed spirituality is the invisible object of Alberto Giacometti, who kind of figures in a fairly big way as a one of the few named kind of like real world named artists in the book. Can you talk a little bit about Giacometti and like how he influenced this, and what that invisible object is, or if you have any idea?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I mean, yeah, I actually studied painting at Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, and became interested in comics as an undergrad. And but for years, I was a painter, and I became obsessed with Giacometti as an undergrad, reading, I think I read like a book-length interview with him, and I was really, really enchanted by his work. And I think that like in his work, there's like, his kind of like obsessive nature really spoke to me. He had kind of an early surrealist period, and then later on he started doing these portraits where he would kind of like, it just kind of became this ritual where he would sit with the person dozens of times and kind of like obsessively paint and repaint their face. And there's a quotation by him that appears in the book that's spoken by one of the other main characters, where he's talking to one of his painting subjects, and they say something like, well, how do you know when you're done? And he kind of had this like koan like or mystical way of speaking, and he would be like, oh, well, it's not a question of being finished, it's a question of knowing how to begin, because if I knew how to begin, everything would be nearly finished. So I guess like in that, and in his work generally, and in him, I saw like a seeking after like something undefined. Like seeking after something that can't really be articulated. Like I kind of feel like I'm always doing that. I kind of feel like I kind of feel like I want to bring a lot of things into my work that are like not really clearly expressible, that are unconscious elements, like and I think that like if there's spirituality in the book, it's in that kind of sense of seeking that I have in relation to my work, and that I saw in Giacometti. Like another person I love is David Lynch, who I think who everyone loves, and I think like it's because he is able to give artifice to like these very undefined unconscious, very large kind of images and ideas. There's an aspect of my work that kind of lives there too, as well as like the more conscious, more concrete science fictional stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I thought the three artists, well, not the three, there's more than three artists, but I was thinking there was, the artists kind of embody a little bit of like different views on this idea of like, going off planet, on maybe moving, some of the population out there, those kinds of things. And so the sort of the most collaborative artist is the one that sort of already lives there and is interested in Giacometti, and he's sort of like, I'm here, I love it here, I'm gonna stay here, this helps me create whatever. There's the other woman, I'm not sure what her name is off the top of my head, but she's very skeptical, like, and very kind of has a kind of very, very Marxist kind of look at everything. Then there's the other artist, I can't remember his name either on the top of my head, but he's he's sort of like kind of a little bit kind of easygoing. And one kind of fascinating line was, he sort of talks about a science teacher that's, told him when he was young that like, hey, someday we'll be going to this planet Lure, and we'll be there and we'll kind of inhabit it. And, everybody was saying that it was BS, but here they were, right? They ended up being on this planet. So there's this kind of, multiple kind of responses to technology, to space exploration, to this idea of like another world, the possibility of another world. I'm wondering, what if you have a kind of a horse in that race, whether you're thinking about this in a specific way or you're kind of, sort of a little bit more unformed.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. Yeah, I definitely like, it's interesting. I really am into the idea that like stories, that narrative art can have like an ethics that is legible, that is clear, but then also show some like, depict some like ambiguities and gray areas like that I really tried to do that. Like I showed Jo, the main character, kind of in that scene that I read a little earlier. I was like trying to show kind of her skepticism toward Lure. She and her friends think it's creepy, they think it's not cool, and yet she kind of contradicts herself by just going along with it, by going to the planet and doing the thing. And then the other characters have different kind of like shadings of feeling about their involvement with about going to the planet and their involvement with this art project. It's I think like the different voicings that you described of like feeling about the whole thing, just kind of like comes from my experience of like being a working person, like having a day job for many years. Like I've had like a variety of I currently work like a retail job, but I previously have had like a variety of weird like quasi-corporate art gigs that I hated and that were like kind of non-starters, and so, but nonetheless I kind of got a sense for that world, and I think it was just kind of like, I think a lot of what my thinking around this book and those characters comes from the idea of work, and that's something that has kind of defined my adult life, as with pretty much everyone else, and I think that like they all like for the most part voice some degree of like skepticism or disbelief about the whole thing, and yet here they are like showing up for it. That's just kind of the experience we have, like of like grudgingly like going to our jobs and so on. And then the Jo and then her coworkers Chris and Rachel, who are also two young people who are sent along to work on the project. They have like a degree of remove from the whole thing. There's another character, Ian, who Jo falls in love with, who has more drank the Kool-Aid and has attained a higher rank within this kind of like structure of this kind of hierarchy on the planet. So I was trying to show, different people kind of finding their way in this structure, and like, yeah, I guess I've seen like, I guess a lot of it comes from, especially Ian, who not to spoil too much, but kind of has to make a drastic decision to kind of protect himself later in the book and protect his job, etc. Like he is willing to like be cruel to other people for the sake of the power and the comfort that he's attained, and not really power, but like position of comfort and and rank. And I guess that kind of grows out of like, yeah, my working life and kind of hearing ordinary people suddenly like give voice to like the company advertising, and I seeing people, perfectly ordinary people, like get promoted and then suddenly become cruel to their former colleagues. That's an experience I've had again and again over the years, and that I kind of fascinates me, troubles me, really speaks to capitalism, corporatism. That's something that I tried to depict in the book.
Right. So lure, in a sense, is sort of like embodies that relationship on some level. You either sort of drink the Kool-Aid of lure, or and kind of assimilate, or try to resist in some way.
Yeah.
So in that mode, is resistance futile? It's like that, like the character is like, I thought it was all bullshit, but here I am. Right. Is our resistance kind of like, we think it's all bullshit, but yet in 20 years we're still kind of doing the thing that we're doing, and everything seems to be okay.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think resistance is futile. I kind of wanted the story to have a sort of tragic arc, but yeah, and to depict these kind of like, and to depict these complicities, like, I think that's just interesting to me. But I definitely don't think resistance is futile. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just thought I'd ask. Let me just throw it out there really quick. I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet, but please do. We're getting relatively close to the end here. I think we got 20 minutes or so here. So just want to kind of throw that out there for the audience. I was also struck by the sort of the environment of lore, sort of very sort of mall-like place. I mean, obviously it has to be sort of self-contained on this water planet. And did you have like a particular place in mind? Did you is it just kind of like the general mall-like nature of our cities and places, and that we sort of inhabit every day?
Yeah, no, I was definitely thinking about that general kind of everyday mall-like, consumerist, sense of everything. I was definitely thinking about that. And I don't know, I guess I'm really it's kind of a hotel that's also a mall, this building, and then it's also has these like beaches around it. I'm really interested in hotels in a way, and for whatever reason, like I find spaces where that we spend time in but don't live in, I find them to be pretty fascinating. I find a lot of interesting things in like the design of spaces, and like, and in kind of the look of like of malls, hotels, places that like where fun and luxury, whatever, are where some of those ideas are visualized. Like I think those ideas about what is fun and what is comforting, what is a nice time, what is a nice vacation, are just interesting to me. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I like I like, I guess, yeah, it's this kind of transitional space. Like nobody, well, some characters do kind of live there, but like all of the characters are just sort of passing through. And I don't know if I can articulate why exactly that's interesting to me, like being, a space where you're just a guest,
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure why that's interesting to me, but it is.
Yeah, it's like airports and all those transitional spaces that we occupy briefly. And we can always run into all kinds of other people. So that that's kind of an interesting aspect of it. I once worked in this crazy art exhibition in Javits Center in New York in like early 2000s, and it was all it was just a huge exhibition of art for hotels essentially. So it was just it was completely filled to the gills. Like there was so many vendors. And they were just selling art by the pound. It was like, this hotel chain needs 100 impressionist paintings, and they would just go to this thing and find a booth that had a bunch of random impressionist stuff painted. And yeah, that's really like a fascinating kind of aspect of that. The biggest booth, by the way, was Garfield. Like Garfield had the biggest booth and all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah, in a way, the main characters are kind of involved in that kind of corporate art, right? They're kind of that sort of needs kind of a backdrop of artistry for the power to kind of to function in some way. Like, what do you think the relationship is between sort of art and power, and are we all kind of essentially doomed to support the powers that be through our art, because they are the ones who are buying this stuff, and they're the ones who value it and the ones who exhibit it.
Yeah, that's a very large, very question. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, like, in the context of this book, I was really like thinking about spectacle, like something that I was kind of something that kind of inspired me, that might be kind of a surprising influence for this book, was the opening ceremony for the Olympics. I think it was the Beijing Olympics, which is like fascinating to watch, and that is less kind of I just kind of like took that and transposed it onto this kind of framework. It's not so much like, I feel like thematically, the Olympics and then this thing that's based on the World Economic Forum. I don't know if there's a ton of overlap there, but I was just really drawn to the idea of like a big spectacle, a big celebration, and I kind of wanted the art, the piece of art that the characters are working on to be this like this big spectacular kind of fanfare thing, just because I do feel like a lot of art serves that function. I mean, yeah, I've actually not read Society of the Spectacle, but I feel like that's probably a conversation there. But I was thinking about art as being a art in the context of this book as just kind of being like decoration for power, I think, yeah, I mean, all art that surrounds us requires money and all these things, and so I think a lot of these things are a little more implicit in the world around us. But in this book, I tried to create a more just kind of have it be made literal, the way that art like attends to power.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, Society of Spectacle definitely was talking more about, sort of the 20th century, spectacle, like everybody's tuning into the same channel, everybody's tuning into the same film. Nowadays, we're a lot more, fragmented in terms of media. And the spectacles happen, in places like the Olympics, where it's like everybody's, where people are watching all at once, or in like virtual spaces where, you essentially have, thousands and thousands of people participating in a single game or something.
Right.
Oh, it looks like we have a question here. Let me get that. Let me get to that. All right. So David asks, I was thinking about what you said with the fascination with hotels, malls, temporary places where you don't really belong, and it got me thinking about the out-of-place hero that's pretty rampant in fiction and sci-fi. Thinking about Gulliver, Buck Rogers, Fry from Futurama, the person out of place, out of time. Are these the same concepts, or maybe same base fascination that makes the two concepts pop up in art and literature and film?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I definitely, the sense of placelessness, I think, in this book is, I think that has a long history in Western literature, and I think in this book, I tried to make it the placelessness of contemporary capitalism, and so on. I think speaking to that whole thing about like transitional spaces that we pass through, I also tried to show the characters in this book, they do like form connections, and then without spoiling too much, I wanted to show the connections being fragile and tenuous, like they form connections and then they break them in the span of the book. That was something I was very conscious of, and that I think maybe speaks to some of this, some of the other ideas around like the spaces in general. Like, and I don't know, I don't have like a full justification for that. I guess like, I think like there may be something, about power relations and capitalism in there, or something about my own personality. But yeah, I very much felt driven to kind of like show people forming connections and then breaking them, like they're being very fitful and not very lasting connections.
Yeah, that's interesting. The kind of the no placeness of it kind of brings me to the idea of utopia, which is famously means no place. The sort of the original utopia that Sir Thomas More wrote about was on was a small island somewhere off the coast of the New World, America.
Right.
And definitely the Lure, the ocean planet, the sort of the planet itself is kind of an island, but then there's also like an island on the planet of the ocean, and it definitely brought utopia as a kind of an idea, this sort of impossibility, this no place, this that also exists as a kind of a critique of the other place, right? Usually whatever the utopia that's been created in the past usually critiques the other place, the place where we come from to experience utopia. Was utopia at all like on your mind? Utopias, dystopias, this kind of idea, and Lure kind of as a kind of anti-utopia?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Lure is a utopia for some. It's a utopia for the 1% or what have you, and then it's not even like a dystopia for everyone else. I mean, it's like the Earth is like a dystopia for everyone else. Everyone else is just kind of left behind. And yeah, I mean, that I think is that I think for me speaks to the world we're living in, that like the way the laws and economic systems in America work beautifully for our business leaders, et cetera, elites, and leave everyone else in the dust, and that disparity and inequality only becomes seemingly more and more extreme with each passing year. And then I guess, yeah, the book doesn't really gesture much at like what a real utopia would look like. And even like a lot of, you know, leftist thinkers that I read, like don't necessarily, at least in you know, what I can call to mind, having read lately, there's not a whole lot of concreteness. There's not like a concrete vision of utopia or what the good society would look like. There's a lot of like, and I think that's just kind of like where we're at. It's like right now we're just kind of like, how do we even survive? How do we survive what's coming for us, what we're living in and what's coming for us, you know, much less like you know, how do we transform everything and yeah, I don't know. And yeah, a lot of my reading kind of leaves that out. And I guess in a way, and I guess I kind of wanted to leave that out too, like what a real utopia would look like. I think in my life and in this book, I kind of, my mind is just like fixated on the problems and the dread and not the solution and maybe some solutions, but not like a really thorough set of solutions.
Right. Which kind of brings me, I guess, to like a final question here. So, you posit this, kind of dichotomy between, capital, the poor, and in the past, like, if you look back to like the sort of the history of like socialism, communism, Marxism, there was a lot of authors in the kind of in those early days of the 20th century that actually had very utopian visions of what like that kind of society might turn out. So like a lot of early Soviet writers would have these fantastical novels, the Red Star being one good example, that posited a socialist planet that gets sort of visited. So but it seems like capitalism right now has a lot more like, hey, we've got a bunch of ideas about the future. Check these out, and maybe they're not the greatest ideas, but at least they're kind of like have this idea. Whereas it seems like the kind of the opposition to that is only kind of a cry of despair and no positing of a kind of like a positive future. Just this is more like a general question, I guess. What do you have like a sense? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I feel like I feel like leftist movements in America are gaining a lot of steam, and I think that's progressive ideas are being talked about publicly more than they were, in recent memory, and I think that's a good thing. I don't know. I think, and I don't even know if I think that like better or is something worth striving for, and that undoing some of the harm, undoing some of the horror, and trying to do better, live better, have a better society. I think like maybe for me that's where my thoughts are, rather than like envisioning the perfect society and then trying to lead us toward that. I think any gestures at like improving someone's life and at improving securing rights for people who need them, providing for people's needs. I think all of those things are worth thinking about and worth fighting for, and that better is always worth imagining and thinking about, even if you're like me and kind of at a loss for like a conception of like what the perfect society, what the good society would be. So that makes sense. It's kind of, I guess it's the Oscar Wilde line, no map without utopia. I don't remember the line exactly anymore, but I don't accept any map that doesn't have utopia on it, or something like that.
Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share about the book that maybe I didn't really kind of catch and bring? We're kind of the last couple of minutes here. Anything that you wanted to maybe give, you know?
Yeah, let's see. Nothing really comes to mind. I mean, yeah, I think we've covered a lot of the key themes and everything, and yeah, yeah, it's
I know it's a very open-ended question.
yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, I hope that we've talked about a lot of dark and foreboding themes, and I think those are in the book. But I also tried to create a sense of wonder in the book, and I think that that's something that I try to do through fantastic fiction. I kind of am not super observant of the distinctions between like sci-fi and fantasy. The book is also kind of surreal in a way. Like there's kind of a general kind of weirdness afoot in it, and I kind of I want to use, I hope to use that also in the service of like wonder and beauty, like the world. I've tried to create a world that, you know, it's a fantastical world, but I hope that it kind of like in like a weird fantastical way expresses some wonderment at the beauty of nature and so on, you know, in addition to like treading among some of these like these darker, rougher themes. So I hope people get that out of it as well.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was, you know, beautifully rendered.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. You know, some of the creatures of the planet reminded me of like Ernst Haeckel drawings. I don't know if you,
Yes,
yeah, kind of have that very organic, but like this also kind of almost like crystalline forms and things like that. So yeah, it was really beautifully visualized. Yeah. Anyway, great job on that.
Thank you both so much for this event. It was really cool to see the actual panels and the artwork, Lane. So thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to all of our participants tonight. Don't forget to support Greenlight and support Lane by buying a copy of Lure. You can buy that through our website. The buy link is in the chat, or you can give us a call at our store or stop by. We're open 7 days a week. Thank you so much, Tom, for the interview. Thank you again, Lane. And thank you to all of you out there.
All right, thank you.
Thank
and
you
definitely
so
buy Lane's book. It's really great. One of my favorite science fiction graphic novels in recent memory. So really highly recommended.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so flattering.
All right.
All right. Have a
Take
good
care.
night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.